I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to help you out and be your admin for the day, Desiree.
Yes, I should say this is Kevin, and he's going to be helping me with our special interest groups now. So we are thrilled that you've joined us today for the art of approachability. Build bridges, create connections, unlock possibilities with our guest speaker, Elena Sarango-Muñiz. She will be speaking to us today, and it is my delight now to tell you a little bit about her. She is an ACC executive coach and emotional intelligence practitioner and the founder of Sarango Executive Coaching. She transforms leadership by making emotional intelligence practical and measurable. With 25 plus years leading HR at global enterprises, including Aspen Technology, Lloyd's Register, and Citgo Petroleum, she now coaches senior executives to build high-performing, engaged teams through proven EQ methodologies. Welcome, Elena. We are thrilled to have you, and I will turn it over.
Thank you, Desiree. Hello, everyone. Can you see the screen? Perfect. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. So for the next 90 minutes, we're going to be discussing, because I hope this is a conversation, not just me presenting. We're going to be discussing a topics that I really love, and it's a passion of mine. And I want you to think about the art of approachability, not as charisma, not as a specific personality that only certain people have. I want you to think about it as a practice. And as coaches, you can use this practice with your clients. We also have people here in the audience that are not coaches. So I want to refer to all of you as leaders. So this is for leaders to develop their approachability through the intersection of emotional intelligence into it. Mhm. I want to share with you a pro tip I just learned not too long ago. If you're going to be taking notes, I just learned that when you take notes in a piece of paper or even in a tablet, you divide the page in two. So you put a line that divides the page in two. And on the left-hand side, you take notes, the words, the concepts that you want to retain. And on the second half, you start writing the how you're going to implement that concept, that word, that practice, why you're going to implement it, and when. And I know this is, you're capturing, you're trying to write things down, but it's a fabulous way. I've been practicing it to not just trying to retain everything that I'm going to share with you, but also start embedding it into your brain so you can start using it. So I wanted to give you that invitation before we start. Let me move into the next slide, which is an opening question for you. I would like for you to think about when you think of the most approachable leader. And I say approachable, I don't say the most impressive leader you've worked with or that you've ever known. What did they do that made you feel that way? Take some time, notice what comes up, write it down on your notes, and hold on to it because we'll come back to it later. When you think of the most approachable leader you've ever known, what did they do that made you feel like you could approach them? Before we continue, let me introduce myself since most of you do not know me. I'm Elena Sarango-Muñiz. The accent comes from Peru. I'm originally from Lima, Peru. but I came to the US to pursue my American dream when I was 22 years old. I got my master's degree in hotel and restaurant management, a very important piece of information for you to understand why I talk about this topic. And then I got married, I worked in hotels in the luxury area of hotels. I worked in oil and gas. I worked in professional services, and then I moved into technology. And throughout those 25 years as an HR leader, working with leaders from all over the world, one of them on this Zoom call, thank you, Sergio, for being here. I understood that all these leaders that are under real pressure still are trying to be human, to bring that humanity into the workplace. So Bridge, which is what I'm going to introduce you in a moment, is that framework that I created as an attempt to help those leaders close the gap of being these technical experts and relationally stuck. So the bridge is going to connect what probably we encounter every day with our clients, a client that comes to you, a leader that comes to you that has rise up to the top or is building their career based on their technical skills. But when it comes to people skills, there is a gap, a huge gap. But the gap is fixable. And that's what today is all about. When I work with these clients and with these leaders from all over the world, for every corner of the world, I also realize that culture is an important piece when it comes to approachability. But that's when emotional intelligence comes into place, because that's when you develop the emotional intelligence skills that we know will be helpful for these leaders, you realize that culture is just a component and that you can overcome those differences with this emotional intelligence skills. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever been told that you are unapproachable? Okay, maybe not with those exact same words. I have. Early in my career, I had just gotten promoted to a leadership role, and I'm walking down the hallway, and this employee approaches me and says, Elena, congratulations on your promotion. But there's something that I've been wanting to tell you for a long time. You and your team, you're not human resources. You are inhuman resources. I was trembling. I was shocked. I went back to my office. I sat down and started thinking and saying all these things about myself, going back to my childhood and I remember when I was 6 or 7 years old, I was walking down the street holding my mom's hand, and this stranger approached us. And he looked at me and he said, "Little girl, you're too pretty to be frowning." When I was 7 years old, I had no idea what that meant. Actually, I was also confused in that hallway when that employee told me I was unapproachable. So all these years, I made that moment in the hallway my purpose, my drive to discover or to prove to the world that I was human, that I was not inhuman. Hello, I'm in human resources. How can you tell me I am inhuman? You might have had some of those moments yourself. where somebody said something to you that put a label on you that you didn't even realize it was defining you, who you were, your identity. Maybe it got stuck in your mind and you never touched it again, but it showed up in many moments, especially in difficult ones. The reason why I specialize in emotional intelligence, I'm not an expert, but this is my passion, is because I really wanted to discover, why did I feel that way? And why did somebody dare to tell me something like that? Of course, at the beginning, I was defensive, I was sad. But as the years passed and more experiences went through my life, I realized something that I need to do here. So, what is approachability? This very famous coach came up with this definition. Approachability isn't just a personality trait, it's a strategic, learnable skill that transforms culture from the inside out by connecting with others at a human level. I know it's a long definition, but I think this summarizes what I'm talking to you here today. And I'm going to double click on the words in green. Strategic. If you're a leadership coach, you know that we want to make sure that leaders put emotional intelligence development into strategy, right? We are always advocating for EQ development in organizations because we know the value of it. And learnable skill, the good news, as you might all know, is that emotional intelligence is something that we can nurture. Contrary to IQ that peaks at a certain age, emotional intelligence can grow until the day we die. So it is a learnable skill. Anyone can grow it, no matter how traumatic their childhood was, no matter how set on their ways they are. Emotional intelligence is something that we can develop, and it's directly related to how approachable people see us. And that is the invitation today, for you to see how is that you can develop your approachability or develop the approachability of your clients through emotional intelligence. So now we know the definition, why approachability matters. We're going to spend 90 minutes talking about approachability when there are other leadership skills you might be thinking about that are on your list. I truly believe that approachability is the ground floor skill. When we talk about emotional intelligence, self-awareness is the foundation for the rest of the emotional intelligence components. Without approachability, all those other skills that are on your list will leak. And I want to show you the 3 different horizons where that leak can show up, and where a small change can make a big difference so it doesn't leak anymore. Those 3 horizons are self, the most important one of them. It's that inner work that we all know we have to do. We maybe avoided it in the early years. Maybe we are avoiding some of that development today. But it is about knowing ourselves, noticing what's our story, what's that remote control that has been running our lives before you walk into a meeting with a client. It's noticing who you are before you introduce yourself to a team. Knowing yourself and doing the inner work is going to help you show up as who you are when it is important, when it matters the most. The encounter or others is the quality of our presence. Now that we know self, it is the quality of our presence in a conversation, in dealing with a difficult situation with another person, in our family, in a disagreement, in a big organization culture change or initiative. And that then scales into culture. And culture is a very important piece of this whole art of approachability development. This is where the self shows up with others in a bigger pot. This is where the conversation happens without you being in the room, and it's a reflection of who you are as a leader. All three matter. All three are very important. Most leaders only focus on the middle one. But we're going to see why all three are very important. I want to pause here and see if there are any questions about anything that I just covered so far. Kevin?
No questions yet. So
Okay,
keep going.
very good. We're going to come back to this. So let me ask you this question, and I would love your participation. So please drop an answer in the chat. What do you think, in your opinion, is the top quality of an approachable leader? Think about one word, okay, maybe two or three. And below your answer, I want to put the why that specific word defines the top quality of an approachable leader. And as you see the responses, I want you to start maybe identifying some patterns. Take a minute. Kevin, and if you want to help me read some of the responses as they
Sure.
show up, that would be
Sure.
great.
Great. Let's see. Yeah. So we have warmth. We have lets the team feel recognized. They listen and care. Transparency and empathy. Authenticity. Non-judgmental and open. Listening builds trust, allows autonomy. Warmth. It attracts. They're patient. Let's see. Genuine and they listen. So a lot of listening and communication elements in the patterns here.
Yes. Thank you, Kevin.
Sure.
I love that. A lot of listening, a lot of allowing people to approach them, being someone that people can trust. Thank you. Those words that you've come up with can be directly related to the qualities of an emotional, intelligent leader. And as I mentioned before, these are not things that you either have or you don't have. So when we work with the leaders, when we work with clients, when we work with teams, it is very important that we highlight that part, that we can get to this point. There's some steps we need to make. There's some reps we need to make to get to that point. And approachability is not a velvet rope that comes with a title. We all know that. Or the higher you go up, the more approachable you become. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes it's actually the opposite. I work with leaders, I've seen their progression, and when they got to the top, something happened to where they thought they were entitled oh, you need to reserve some time to talk to me. You cannot just show up in my office. I work with a leader who literally had a sign that said, do not disturb on her door. She was my boss at some point. Can you believe that? That's not her picture. I just got that picture from the internet, but it kind of felt like that. The worst part was that it was not just a sign on her door, it was a systemic issue because it was contagious. Her whole team, her whole HR team was like that. So when I came to join the team, I found myself completely lost because everything that I had learned from my hotel days, acknowledge the guest 5 feet away, smile, use their name. This was completely the opposite. The sad part that is that I started noticing that when there were issues in the organization, maybe a harassment case, maybe a complaint, they were not getting into that area, the area where they needed to fit in, because there was a do not disturb. How many of you have worked with people like that? I have coached clients. For example, this gentleman that I started coaching a while back was very proud to tell me, Elena, for me to be able to be approachable to my employees, I need to have all the answers that they come to me for. So I asked them to send me an email with their question before they come to see me. So I can think about their question, the answer first. And I said, no, approachability is being spontaneous. It's creating that instant connection. It's not having to put a wall between you and the employee. He changed that and became a very popular leader. Employees really want true connection. With some coaches, I've seen the same thing. We invade the client with all these forms and all these platforms they need to fill in. We have some assessments. Yes, I use the EQ assessment actually for all my clients. But before we do that, we need to create that connection, that rapport, so there is trust, so they can approach us with any questions they have. That is true connection. So I want to challenge you and ask you, what is that invisible do not disturb sign you are carrying in your behavior, in your style as a coach or as a leader? It's invisible maybe because you don't know that it exists, but I want to give you this time to maybe think about something that is making you unapproachable. And not only think about what is that behavior, but also when does it show up? And who does it show up with? Because that's going to say a lot about your approachability. So I'm going to give you a minute. I have a very fancy clock here for you to, I know you can't hear it, but I can hear the minute going. So think about, what is that invisible DND sign on your own practice? Oh, right. Oh, okay. I don't know if you heard. That was loud for me. I would love some participation. So if you can come out of mute and share, maybe you thought about something about yourself or maybe something from your clients, what you have observed. So who would like to come out of mute and share?
I'll be happy to do that.
Jamie?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Jamie.
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I was just thinking about this as an invisibility is that basically I moved physically, geographically, I moved out of my area where I had known all of my professional contacts and retired from my main, business of, most of my career and, began coaching as more of my full-time avocation rather than like as part of my other job. And I was thinking that that was invisible in the sense that I think that it is harder to communicate. It's great to be able to communicate with people through LinkedIn and electronically, but it is just not quite the same. And there is an out of sight, out of mind component to that.
Mhm.
And so I was just thinking of that, that it's just been a lot harder. And but I also feel like it's not all on me to stay in touch with certain people. Like if they want to stay in touch with me, I am open. I will make time. I still make time with former employees if they want to consult with me and just like, can I reconnect with you? Sure, I will be happy to give you a half an hour, an hour, whatever you need. But I'm not going to go looking for that all the time too. So it's something that I think I've kind of had to wrestle with myself.
hmm Thank you, Jamie. And it's very similar to when a leader moves from one organization to the other, from one team to the other, right? They find themselves in this completely different environment and they have to think about, okay, how do I adapt here? And we're now touching this emotional regulation concept that is very fascinating. Thank you, Jamie. Anyone else would like to share?
I was going to say something a little bit similar to Jamie along the lines of using email and technology to communicate with people more than doing it in person, either physically or just picking up the phone. It feels like that human touch is more approachable than using technology. But then I also wonder, it's like the importance of setting boundaries to make space for oneself. So I do struggle with where is a boundary versus what's being unapproachable.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Sarah. And, I'm sure you all know that AI is actually making it even better for us as coaches to help individuals develop those emotional intelligence skills, that approachability factor, even through AI, right? Like when I contact a client, most of the time I record a video or a audio message rather than sending an email or a text. AI now makes it so easy for us.
Mm.
Excellent. Thank you. So approachability and do not disturb sign, are close together because it's not about how we show up necessarily, it's how others experience us. And that's why I focus on the bridge, which I'm about to introduce you. And that's not this bridge, but this is the bridge that a lot of our clients, a lot of our employees, a lot of our peers have walked through or are walking through, that it feels very unstable, very weak, very fragile. How many times have we walked through that same bridge going from one point to the other? Maybe Jamie, when she moved cities, she felt like, oh, if I step in here, I might fall through. So the purpose of us helping clients with approachability is to make this bridge stronger, more safer. And the leaders here that have teams, when you think about your teams and creating a safe environment, we talk about psychological safety. It shouldn't look like this, where they are so worried about the next step they're going to take because they don't know what's going to happen. I when I came to this country, I live in Houston, Texas. I came to the University of Houston. It felt exactly like this. I thought I was clinging from one rope and that rope was going to break and snap at any moment. But there was somebody on the other side of the bridge who became my best friend who said, wait a minute, I'm going to go and get you, hold your hand, and help you walk through it. And that's what I want for all of us to think about when we're thinking about our clients, our teams. How can we make this better for us and for all of them? So this is the bridge that I have come up with, which replicates a little bit the 5 components of emotional intelligence, although these are 6 pillars that look strong, that look steady, that are taking you safely from one point to the other. It's several people walking down the bridge. It's not just you. There's a leader leading the way, and we're confidently walking through point A to point B. This bridge has 6 interconnected emotional intelligence parts, which are the pillars of the bridge that create stronger leaders, stronger teams, and therefore greater impact, a culture where people want to belong to. This is not a model to memorize. This is a vocabulary you grow into. So I'm going to take you through each letter. And as I do, I will invite you to notice which one of those pillars is asking you for your attention. Not just for you, but maybe with the leader you're working with. We're not going to spend too much time on each pillar, but a couple of them. The first one and the last one, the 2 most important pillars. But we will walk this journey together. But before we walk through this journey, I think it's important to understand the emotional intelligence part of things. What are emotions? I love this definition that I got from a neuroscientist that I follow. And he said, emotions are complex psychological states that involve a combination of subjective experiences, physiological responses, and behavioral responses. I love this definition because it's not just touching the cognitive part of the emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a lot to do with our bodies, physiological responses, and therefore behavioral. It's a whole system activation. Your thoughts, your feelings, your physical sensations, sweaty palms, heart racing, headache, cognitive interpretations about past experiences maybe, or about the feelings we're feeling, and the outward behaviors. Now, let me ask you this. Are emotions pre-installed in our brains when we're born, or are they constructed? Does anyone have a strong opinion about which one of the two? Are emotions biological? They come pre-installed in us, or are they constructed along our lives? Anyone? You can put it in the chat if you want to.
Seeing a variety of responses, both constructed, deconstructed.
Okay. So that means there's fans of both theories. And actually, there's not a definite answer. Okay, there's some schools that talk about the basics, emotions, fear, anger, happy, they're already in us. They come pre-installed in our brains, and there's nothing that we can do about it. And then there's the school that says, okay, there might be some basic things that come in our genes from our parents, but we build them along based on our experiences in life, our traumatic situations. I'm sure when you talk to clients, you realize that there is something in their maybe childhood, even though most of us are not psychologists or counselors, those conversations come up. And I love the part about the physiology because we ignore it. I'm an executive leader.
So, Elena, that part seems like we come coded with the physiological responses, right? Like we come coded with those emotions, but then how we attach them to experiences varies.
Exactly. Thank you, Desiree. I like exactly. I like the definition that emotions have a biological foundation. Genes, absolutely. If your mom, had anxiety, and this comes from a million years ago, right? Where, our ancestors, it was all about survival, right? But if your mom is an anxious person, maybe you inherited that piece of anxiety in you. But how you experience and express those emotions is shaped by everything you've lived through. I like this definition of it's a software running on hardware with a lot of pop-ups and upgrades all the time. That's what emotions are. And emotions inspire action, and action inspire emotions. They are inseparable. I once worked with a client that told me that he slept maybe 3-4 hours a night. And I could see the relationship between the quality of sleep and the way he was showing up at work and how people were perceiving him. And that's why he hired me. Not right. So, but the first thing I had to attack, really to bring to the surface, was why are you only sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night? I wouldn't be able to survive. I'm somebody that needs to sleep at least 7. And this is the importance about talking about somatics and the body. He told me about a traumatic situation where in the middle of the night he received a call, and because his phone was not on, he missed saying goodbye to somebody. And in that moment, he said, I will never leave my phone off at night. And that's why he only sleeps that many hours. So how awake we are, how well rested we are, even how much glucose is in our system, all that matters in how we show up at work and how we show up during the day and how people perceive us. So let's never forget the biological part of it, the somatic part of the development of emotional intelligence. If you see somebody sad, the body will show you, the slumped, your shoulders come inwards, you're not smiling, you're maybe not saying anything, you retrieve. When you're happy, what happens? You stand up taller, wider, you have a smile. So emotions are reflected in the body. So let's talk about the first component or the first pillar of the bridge, which is being. B is for being, B for bridge. The first pillar. Before I meet you, I have to meet myself. This is self-awareness. This is presence. This is why am I here? This is questioning, what's the story? What's that remote control that has been running my life? We as coaches, as leaders, our responsibility is to help remove that remote control and put it in front of the client and observe with a wider lens what's been running our lives, all these thoughts, all these conversations we're having with ourselves. The hardest one for high achievers, because what do high achievers do? We're trained to skip it. We're trained to have that conversation, the observation, that self-regulation, because we just gotta go. Are you sick? Forget it. Just run. Just show up to work. You have fever? Who cares? You only slept 2 hours? It doesn't matter. Skip it. But what would happen, picture this, if you're preparing before the hardest meeting or the most high stakes meeting of your week, and you just take 2 minutes alone. Not to prepare for talking points, but to notice what you're bringing into the conversation. It's a small practice that makes a big difference. So be or being focuses on self-awareness, on identity and purpose. The outcome is that leaders gain clarity on their values, what triggers them, who triggers them. It's a more authentic leadership identity. So I ask my clients sometimes, who are you? Oh, I'm Peter. No, that's the label your parents gave you when you were born. Well, I'm the VP of, no, that's your role, that's your title. Who are you? You can't answer that question unless you do this self-reflection. One of the best things to the practices that we do as coaches to bring this to the surface is journaling, right? Most of us use the tool of journaling with our clients. Write down, you give them a couple of questions to find out who they are. Because that identity might not be applicable anymore because it was running by something old that came from our childhood. That day in the hallway when that lady told me I wasn't human, it shook me to the core, and I started asking myself, who am I? Oh my God, am I that inhuman? It's not until I started coaching clients that I became more aware of the pain that was driving my life, because the pain that my client was bringing, I would say, oh my God, that's my pain too. And that's the beauty of what we do and why we do this. When we're talking about being, we know that there's a level of what others can see, right? Oh, Jessica, she's always cheerful, she's always smiling, she's easygoing. But then there's under the water, there is this part of Jessica that only close people to her know about. She takes anxiety pills. She only sleeps 3 to 4 hours at night. And then there's a deeper level, what only I know about myself that nobody else knows. I don't know about you, but there's some things that the closest people in my life don't know about me at all, that I've kept inside. Someday will come out, who knows? And then there's even a deeper level, which is the subconscious, what we don't know at all that is defining us, that only shows up when there's a difficult conversation, when there's an emergency, when there's a death or illness in the family, when you got laid off. And you're like, where did that come from? When we open ourselves, there's a lock to understand who we are. And that could be done through coaching. It could be done through counseling, therapy, and I recommend both. Then we're able to remove that, what I call that iceberg, so we can build that bridge. Otherwise, the iceberg is always going to be in the way. There's this great quote from Seneca. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Our emotions are always anticipating versus analyzing what's actually in the present moment. It's self-inflicted pain. We have this inner chatter, this conversation we're having ourselves that is mostly negative. The power of what ifs. Oh my God, what if I have a friend that is always, what if? That doesn't serve you. When we want to be and be present and understand who we are, we have to focus on the present. And you might already be identifying some mindfulness conversation, words, techniques, because mindfulness is powerful to cross this bridge. Have you heard of Byron Katie and the method of the 4 simple questions? This is a great tool I use with my clients for that, for discovering the being. Is this thought true? Can I be 100% true? Certain, that this is true? What happens to me when I believe this thought? How would I feel if I didn't have this thought? If you don't follow Byron Katie, I highly suggest you do. She's amazing with these 4 simple questions. So let's move to the R, the second pillar, which is relating or relationships. Once we are self-aware, once we are comfortable in our own skin, once we have a better understanding of how people are perceiving us because of how we're showing up, then we are able to create, maintain, and develop relationships with others. That's social awareness, right? Which is a very important component of emotional intelligence. The connection is the container everything else travels through. Empathy, we're talking about empathy. We're talking about trust. I believe Sarah talked about boundaries. This is where we establish boundaries and limitations, limits. Because boundaries, as you know, is something that we establish on our own for ourselves. This is a commitment we make to ourselves. I will never answer the phone after 8 p.m. Limits are something that we declare to others. Offices close at 5 p.m. We are social beings. We cannot survive and thrive without one another. So this connection, this relating is so key. Humans are wired to long for connection. You've read articles, there's an epidemic about loneliness. When you lack this connection, your emotional health tanks. So helping our clients, helping our teams, our employees, our family to be able to relate to one another is key. And that starts with curiosity. It starts with sitting in a meeting with an employee and truly being curious about what's happening with them. Why is that they missed the last 3 days? When I was in HR, 3 days, no call, no show, bye. What happened wait a minute, help me understand, why were you gone for 3 days? What happened? Are you okay? That doesn't mean you're not going to apply the rules. It means that you create that space for the person to really verbalize things, to establish a conversation. And in emotional intelligence, being able, and this comes from Freud and Jung, when people are able to verbalize their emotions, the solution, the environment, the person feels so much better. That's how we develop this part of emotional intelligence. And having a vocabulary of emotions beyond the 5 or 6 basic ones is very important. There's so many tools out there with wheels and all these emotions and how they relate to each other that I highly suggest you use with your clients. I usually put that wheel in front of them and I say, choose which one. And I don't want you to just say happy, tired, frustrated. Then you can also here use the reframing or the flipping around concept, right? Take your original thought and reverse it in 3 ways. For example, if your thought is, my client doesn't respect me, flip to the opposite and say, my client does respect me. And see what comes through when you flip it that way. I always invite my clients to do this. And then you can flip to them and say, I don't respect my client. Maybe that's what it is. And you can even go further and say, I don't respect myself. So that's another tool I use to facilitate the ability to relate to others so you are more approachable. So you are safer to come and talk to. So you're safer to say, yes, I want to talk to you, Elena. I'm going to pause again here. Kevin, any questions about any of this?
Yep, no questions at the moment. If there's
Okay.
one that comes up, I'll interrupt you.
Perfect. So the pillar of influencing. Now you are more aware of who you are and how people are perceiving you. You've gotten better at relating to others, establishing new relationships, building trust with your team, being more curious about the other human being across the room. Now you don't need to push, to force a practice, a concept, a policy, an initiative. Clarity in service of shared purpose comes with a natural influencing pillar. You know, this is when I talk about this, people get nervous because influence sounds a little bit like manipulation. But when you step into the first 2 pillars, it doesn't feel that way. There's a difference between trying to convince someone and invite someone. And when there's trust and that relationship is strong, that invitation comes across very naturally. When you're championing a reorg, you're working with a client and you're implementing or framing the problem together, the solution often emerges without you forcing it. It comes with flexibility. It comes with less stress, even with optimism. Influencing is when you're already looking out to the other side of the bridge and you're like, "Ah, yeah, I'm looking forward to go there. There's nothing that is going to crack because I trust this person." These are some questions that I have on the slide that you could ask your clients. You know, what am I asking of them and what am I offering when it comes to influencing? So the I is already turning the person into a more emotional, intelligent individual because those components of EQ are starting to show up more easily. Once you have influence on those individuals, decision making becomes easier because you're showing up, they trust you, you're transparent, there is communication back and forth, there's feedback. So now a decision is a value made visible. Every leadership decision is honoring one value, but it's costing another. But the approachable leader is actually naming that cost. They're open to say, we're going to go this route because if we go this way, we're going to lose money. Let me tell you an experience that backfired me, but it really didn't. You know, all these different ideas of how to grow your audience. And I follow this guy, and he said to grow your audience in LinkedIn, make a comment on a news article that LinkedIn posts, right? So I'm sometimes putting my comments in some of these articles. And this day, I was not very emotionally intelligent. And I saw this article about how these companies were cutting some benefits due to the economical financial situation. And I made a comment about how this process of, communicating this to the employees is easier when it's an emotionally intelligent leader communicating it. Something like that. I promise you, I had never had so much backlash on that comment. The impressions on that comment in LinkedIn were of thousands of thousands. I had never seen so many impressions. And all the comments were like, that's not true. Companies shouldn't do that. It was not an attack on me. It was more about people really defending why their benefits were being removed. And I totally understood that. But and I wanted to say, but this is exactly why you need to develop your emotional intelligence, right? Because these decisions are being made at the higher level. But it's how you react to these decisions what determines if you're happy or not, if you're miserable or, you move on. So when a decision is made and you are an approachable leader, those cuts, those budget cuts, you say out loud what the decision is honoring, and you also say what it isn't. Sounds counterintuitive, but that's why you keep trust intact. So in emotional intelligence models, this decision making is all about problem solving, reality testing. I didn't test the reality of that article that day. There was some impulse control there. So that's an example of how I have not followed decision making. Sorry, I was on decision making. I was already on the other pillar, but this is decision making. A decision is talking about judgment, courage, values, aligned choices. When it comes to growing, it's not about just learning. An approachable leader is constantly learning. It's also how you take feedback. If you're in a difficult situation, in a difficult conversation, and you become defensive, you are not honoring that approachability. It's your ability to regulate and say, you know what, I'm going to take that feedback. I'm going to learn from this. So growing is about adapting, at developing. And I want you to start thinking about what is this inviting me to grow into. When you talk to your clients, this is something that you definitely want to talk to. What is that we need to bring into the conversation so you can grow? This is about stress management too. When we're growing, when we're learning, we're also managing our stress. And stress management is a huge component of emotional intelligence because it's all about self-regulation. So now you can see that if you build a strong first pillar, this growing will be so much easier. It's not born from pain, it's born from desire to go and take that next step. And finally, the E for embodying. This is the congruence in what you say, what you do, how you behave. This is really, once you're strong, self-aware individual that has a circle of relationships that are supportive and of trust, and you're able to influence and grow not only yourself, but your team, so you make decisions that are moving everybody along that bridge. Now everybody's innately demonstrating all these emotional intelligence skills. And that's how culture is created. That's how this shows up as, oh, wow, that company is amazing. Because everybody is walking the talk. Not everybody, as we know, there's always, people that don't go with you. They're still in that scary bridge we saw earlier. But as we know, they're watching your walk. If you ask them to protect focus time, you better be protecting your focus time in your calendar. If you tell them that skipping that meeting is optional, you could demonstrate that yourself. They notice. So this is the letter that ties all the pillars together. I would like to create a pause here on purpose, because I know I've been saying a lot to you. The practice underneath each pillar is to pause, is to create a gap between stimulus and response. And there's a very famous quote. It's one of my favorite quotes. We grow when we create that pause in between stimulus and response and make it bigger. That space is gold. So one of the ways I do this with my clients is by a centering practice. And we've talked about the importance of your body. So we're going to do this together. We're going to do a body scan. So I would like to invite you to sit comfortably on your chair and cross your arms and cross your legs and close your eyes if you can. And I'll walk you through this exercise. Be here with your body and notice the temperature in it. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. And notice where in your body you have tension. Notice if your stomach is digesting food. Notice if your eyes are moving around. Maybe one hand is colder than the other. Get familiar with that sound, with that feeling, maybe with the taste that you're experiencing now. Now I want you to locate the center of your body, whichever that center is for you. I call it the anchoring center. And bring your presence there. And with a deep breath, bring your breath there. I invite you to sense where that breath is, which is hopefully lower in your body, not on your chest or your throat. Just invite your body to feel that center. Don't force it. Breathe in, and with the exhale, invite your body to live in that place more. You can open your eyes. And with this centering exercise, you can always ask yourself and your clients, when you get to that point, what will be most helpful here? And that answer will not only come from the mind, it will come from the body. All right. Thank you for participating in that exercise. Kevin, we have a poll. So I would like for all of you to answer the question that Kevin is going to post in the poll. Which bridge practice is your growing edge right now? Is it being? Is it the pillar of relating, where there's empathy, where there's trust? Perhaps it's influencing. You need clarity and alignment. Or maybe it's in the decision pillar, where judgment and courage take priority. Or perhaps you're standing in two pillars, deciding and growing, learning and adapting at the same time.
Right? We have the answers. Elena, do you want to take a guess at what we have for the most?
Oh, Kevin, I would say yes, I want to take the guess, but I can see the answers
Oh,
myself.
you can. Okay. All right. Well, then I bet you would guess and you'd have a pretty good chance of being correct.
I love it. So 40% of you say that your growing edge is in the being. That's very interesting because that is the pillar where we start crossing this bridge. I love it. Thank you, Kevin. You can stop the sharing. There's some that answer influencing and embodying. So wherever you are in your path, I invite you to start small. Maybe tonight is just about jotting some notes. Maybe you took some notes today and you just review them. And if you have clients, I invite you to use some of this with them next time you have a conversation. There's a beautiful book about, I can't remember the name of the book, but it's something about the life is an experiment, or it's a bunch of experiments or something like that. And I love to think about this as my life. My life is just a bunch of experiments. Some of them will work, some of them won't. No, I'm not going to die from it unless I'm jumping from a a tall building without any protection. So experiment with these pillars. Feel free to use them with your clients. Now, we're not going to do this practice because we're running out of time. But here is a summary of the bridge framework. This is really, in one picture, 6 pillars where we can build and help our clients to be stronger leaders, to create stronger teams, to create greater impact. Take a screenshot if you want, carry this image with you for your next conversation. And depending on what that conversation, I want you to ask yourself, today with my client, in which pillar do I want to stand on? And it's okay to take a step back and go to a different pillar. It's okay to jump into a pillar in front of you without feeling ready. Experiment. So a question I want to take with you, we started with, the approachability concept. Who needs you to be more approachable? I want you to answer that question for yourself. It's an invitation, not who is the most approachable leader I've known, but who needs me to be more approachable today, at work, at home, in the mirror. One small move this week, that's the real work. That is all I have for you. And I think we can open it up for questions. Here's my QR code, my contact information. If you want to continue the conversation, the QR code is to connect with me in LinkedIn. And happy to answer any questions at this moment. Desiree, Kevin?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was
Oh,
delightful. Someone was wondering if we could go back to the deciding pillar slide. I think we covered this summary piece of it, but could we pop back there? That was
Absolutely. Yes. Sorry, I went and slide ahead, so I didn't go through this very closely.
you
So
demonstrated perfectly that sometimes we got to take a step back on the bridge to
there
go
we go.
pillar.
There we go. Perfect example of how we're taking a step back. Yeah, I don't know about you, but a lot of my clients come to this place where they're in this place of decision, the fork in the road, right? Should I go this way? Should I go that way? And when you start exploring the other pillars before this one with them, that decision becomes easier. One practice I have, which is sometimes it works with clients, sometimes it doesn't. It depends. You need to sense who your client is I ask them to grab an item in their desk, right? And I say, when they have to make this, decision, when they're in that place of which way do I go? And I just ask them to describe each path by touching that item that they chose on their own. If you go path A, how would that feel? But they start describing the item. Yeah, if I go that way, it's actually a little hard. It pinches my finger. It's a material that it might be a little toxic. And then I ask them to describe this path B with the same item. I'm sorry, with a different item. So I ask them to grab a different item. So here I'm going to grab a pen. Oh yeah, that's definitely a straight line. It's rounded, so it's more flexible. I can push and I can pull sometimes. So that's how they make their decisions. But you can't arrive to that point unless you walk through the first pillars. So I hope that
So what I'm hearing, that's really interesting to me because what I'm hearing then is if someone is stuck at a particular spot on the bridge, it's helpful to go back and walk forward again,
yes,
see
yes, that's
where
it.
the gap is.
Exactly. Because that means that we jumped too fast on that bridge and we didn't dig enough. We didn't really understood from their point of view what a relationship actually means to them. What does trust between two people really mean? I have a client that hired me. It's a leader. She's a leader, and she hired me to coach this employee who's also a leader in the organization because they're having trouble communicating. And when I coached this employee, I realized that they're both standing in the same pillar, trying to stay, in the same pillar together, but they can't coexist because there's no communication, because they didn't explore the being on their own first. So once I was able to explore being with one and I explore being with the other one, they came to co-regulate together on the second pillar. It was very interesting. And we did this exercise, separate, of course, but we did it. Any other questions? Comments, feedback? If you want the slides, I don't know, Desiree, if people want the slides, feel free to contact me, ping me. Happy to share anything with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'll put my email in the chat for you all, and I'll put Elena's email in the chat as well if you want to reach out to her directly.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just being able to see the chat. Thank you, Jamie. Yes, Sarah, we skip on the deciding. I'm sorry, I didn't notice we were on that other slide. I don't know if you're aware, but there's different models of EQ. Today, I've been talking about the model that I learned through my certification as an EQI practitioner. But the models are very similar, right? The components of emotional intelligence are the basic ones: self-awareness, social awareness, stress management, motivation. And there's different schools to talk about these different emotions, but the basics are there, which is to tap into the client's inner being first to be able to help them move through that bridge. And there's going to be many bridges on the road, right? Jamie crosses a bridge each time she moves from one city to the other, or Sergio is about to cross a big bridge, right? And Sergio, I hope Sergio is joining us from Mexico, and it's wonderful to have him here.
Oh,
So
no,
it,
thank you, Elena. It's just a, a- I mean, it's very insightful, and I look forward to get more in deep about the concepts, but beyond that, to the implementation of the bridge. I mean, it's amazing how very common sense concepts can in a put into this type of kind of a systemic approach is can make a lot of difference. In my case, you know me, and I I spent many years without the people management function, so I a little rusty on that. Even though it is pretty much my passion about being with people around, and try to be uh, open door. So, but now I'm going back to my roots. So and this is really really good thing for me.
Thank you, Sergio. It says a lot about you standing in that growing pillar and you wanting to learn and be the best version of leadership that you can, which is what you've always demonstrated anyway when I've worked with you in the past.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that's Desiree, that's it. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to talk to you today, to have this presentation.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being willing to come and share your lens with us. It's always great to have new lenses and new tools at our disposal to help our clients build that self-awareness, right? And then have choices. So thank you. And Kevin, thank you so much for your help and support. I'm so looking forward to having you as a co-pilot on these sessions. So thank you. I think
Well,
you
now that you've demonstrated that for me, Desiree, I can take over all of the tactical logistics, and I know everybody's waiting for me, so I'm the man of the hour for only 30 seconds or less.
Thank you. And I did put in the chat my email as well as Elena's. And if you do want these slides, she has generously offered to provide those. So feel free to just reach out either to me or to Elena for those. All right. Anyone else have any other final questions? Well, thank you all for being here, and I look forward to seeing you at the next session. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.